Hello and welcome back, everyone. Today we are here to talk about a movie that deserves its place alongside classic noir films like Double Indemnity, Touch of Evil, and Chinatown as one of the greatest noir films ever made. That's right, today we are talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I'm really not joking when I say that Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of the best noir films of all time. It nails the aesthetic and all of the storytelling tropes. Now, is this movie more of a comedy than a straightforward noir? Sure. But in order to satirize noir films, the way that Roger Rabbit does shows that everyone who worked on this movie had a deep love and respect for the noir films of the 40s and 50s. And for me, if I'm being honest, my entire affinity for the noir and detective genre of storytelling can be traced right back to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This wasn't one I owned on VHS, but I remember it was on TV all the time in the 90s and early 2000s, and I would watch it pretty much every single time it was on. But Who Framed Roger Rabbit was the first time I saw a detective take on a case, only to discover that the case was just the building block to a much bigger story. But even the noir aesthetics aside, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is just an excellent movie. It's got everything you could want. Great writing, it looks incredible, some amazing performances. The in-camera work done to accommodate the animation still looks incredible today. It's hilarious, and it of course has one of the most traumatic scenes of my entire childhood. But before we get too deep into everything that makes Who Framed Roger Rabbit a masterpiece, let's go back and talk about how this movie came to be. Released in 1988 by Touchstone Pictures, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is actually an adaptation of the 1981 novel Who Censored Roger Rabbit, written by Gary K. Wolfe. And the book is quite a bit different than the movie we got. And I guess the really big thing you should know is that after Who Framed Roger Rabbit was released, Gary K. Wolfe released 2 more books starring Roger Rabbit. And the funny thing is that the second book completely retcons the entire events of the first book as a dream that Jessica Rabbit had. And that's really all I had to say about the books by Gary K. Wolfe. So Disney acquired the rights to adapt the book into a movie, and right away they knew they wanted Steven Spielberg and Amblin to be involved in producing the movie. And interestingly enough, Robert Zemeckis was one of the first names put forward in 1981. He was really excited about doing this movie. However, his last 2 movies, I Want to Hold Your Hand and Used Cars, were both giant bombs, so Disney passed on him almost immediately. But then the project was stuck in development hell for so long that it gave Zemeckis the opportunity to go out and deliver the 1-2 punch of Romancing the Stone in 1984 and a little movie you might have heard of called Back to the Future in 1985. And these 2 being back-to-back hits gave Zemeckis just enough juice to get Disney to sign off on him as director. So while Zemeckis was off making some of the best movies ever made, Spielberg and Disney hired Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seaman to tackle the screenplay. And after a lot of work, they came out with the script that we know today. And I have to say, the script for Who Framed Roger Rabbit is near perfect from a screenwriting perspective. It expertly sets up and then pays off every single story beat. Every little detail we're given in the beginning of the movie comes back to be a major plot point later on. So after Back to the Future was released in 1985, Zemeckis was brought on board to direct the live action portion of the movie, and Canadian-British animator Richard Williams was hired to direct the animation. Williams only worked on this movie so Disney would help him finish his long in development experimental animated film The Thief and the Cobbler. And real quick, let's just talk about Richard Williams for a second. First of all, apparently he openly detested Disney's bureaucracy and hated working for them, and he refused to work out of LA, so he made Disney set him up a studio in London for him and his animators to work out of. And I just think it was kind of awesome that he was able to strong-arm Disney like that, and you know what? It paid off, because Richard Williams won a Special Achievement Oscar for working on this movie. But Who Framed Roger Rabbit truly is a movie that could not be made today for a number of reasons, like the fact that no one can really strong-arm Disney anymore, or the way the production managed to get licensed characters from all of these studios, all of whom's characters would be interacting with each other and Disney characters throughout the movie. And let's just give credit where credit's due here. Papa Spielberg is the only man powerful enough to have ever been able to pull this off, because we've got every notable cartoon character I've ever seen throughout this movie. As for the actual production of the movie, filming began in November of 1986 with Robert Zemeckis directing, Richard Williams in the UK handling all all of the animation. Christopher Lloyd in his most terrifying role ever, the late great Bob Hoskins in the leading role, and the great Dean Cundey as director of photography. And I want to take just a quick second to talk about Dean Cundey. This guy is straight up one of the all-time great cinematographers in film history, having worked on several of my favorite movies like Halloween, The Thing, all 3 Back to the Future movies, Hook, Jurassic Park, and Camp Rock. Okay, I've actually never seen Camp Rock, but Dean Cundey was actually the DP on it, and that's funny to me. But seriously, that list of movies only scratches the surface of Cundey's filmography, and I think some of his best work can be found right here in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because when Cundey, Zemeckis, and Williams met with Disney, they gave them a strict set of rules to follow for fusing live action and animation, including things like not moving the camera, keeping the scenes evenly lit so that shadows weren't an issue, and having the animated characters interact with the real world as little as possible. And the 3 immediately knew that these were the 3 rules they would need to break to make this movie successful. So the team went away and created this test footage, which is a tracking shot at night and features Roger Rabbit interacting with several items in the real world. And honestly, this test footage still looks pretty good. And Disney agreed and officially gave the green light to make Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And after almost 2.5 years of production and post-production, the movie was finally released into theaters on June 22nd, 1988. And it did very, very well, getting nearly universally positive reviews, go on to make $351 million worldwide off of its $70 million budget. This movie went on to be nominated for 6 Oscars, winning 4 of them, and became the second highest grossing movie of 1988 behind Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman's Rain Man. And now that all of that is out of the way, let's dive into the actual plot of this movie and everything that makes it awesome. First of all, the movie opens with this amazing short cartoon with Roger Rabbit and Baby Herman, and the director calling cut, and the pullback to reveal the real world is awesome, and I love how we immediately get to see the cartoons interact with the world, and it immediately feels real. And our reveal of Bob Hoskins as Eddie Valiant is just perfect noir character introduction. First of all, because the movie is set in 1947, everyone already looks like they're in a classic noir movie, but more than that, Eddie immediately takes out and sips from his flask. Right away, we know a couple things about Eddie. He's grumpy and he drinks. And then he has his meeting with R.K. Maroon of Maroon Cartoons, who gives Eddie his first case of the movie, taking pictures of Roger Rabbit's wife Jessica having an affair with Marvin Acme of Acme Inc. And again, this scene does a great job of revealing even more information about who Eddie is as a character. We know he really doesn't like tunes. We don't know why just yet, but this whole introductory meeting is just perfect noir storytelling. We've got our stressed out, sleazy businessman and our overworked and grumpy booze hound of a detective, and the case has to do with an affair. And then we get this nice little tone setting sequence of Eddie leaving the Maroon Cartoon building and ending up on the studio backlots where he interacts with and sees a number of different tunes, all interacting with the real world. And I think the brooms from Fantasia as janitors is an especially nice touch here, as is Dumbo in the scene before. Then we get what I think is the funniest line in the whole movie after Eddie hops onto a moving red car and helps a couple of kids do the same.
Who needs a car in LA? We got the best public transportation system in the world.
There's also again this little perfect moment of storytelling where we see that the Pacific Electric Railway has been bought by a new owner, Cloverleaf Industries. Remember that name. And then we meet Dolores, played perfectly by Joanna Cassidy. And this is where we get the big reveal that the reason Eddie is so grumpy and the reason he hates tunes so much is because Teddy, his brother and business partner, was killed by a tune 5 years earlier. Then it's off to the Ink and Paint Club so Eddie can see Jessica sing and get the pictures he needs to prove the affair. And we get this excellent scene with Donald Duck and Daffy Duck doing dual pianos while also being cartoons and trying to murder one another. And it's just so cool to see these two going at it, and the fact that they're evenly matched, which was a mandate from every studio involved, makes this scene all the more fun because neither one is really winning or losing, they're just being insane and hammering on one another, and it's awesome. And of course we get one of the most important setups of the entire movie here when Marvin Acme sprays Eddie with disappearing ink. And then we get our introduction of Jessica Rabbit, and let's just get it out of the way. Yes, Jessica Rabbit, who's voiced by an uncredited Kathleen Turner, by the way, is drawn to be the most curvaceous thing that's ever been created. She's drawn to be the perfect femme fatale, and that's really all I have to say about Jessica Rabbit's looks. When we get the infamous patty cake scene, and I still think it's hilarious today that patty cakes is somehow equated to sex in this world, it's just hilarious, and Eddie's face as he's taking the pictures is priceless. He's both shocked and confused. Then we get what I think is a really strong proper introduction to Roger Rabbit, and let's just take a quick moment to talk about Charles Fleischer, who voiced Roger Rabbit. This guy was on set, off camera, delivering his lines in a full Roger Rabbit costume every single time Roger Rabbit would appear on screen. He knew he wouldn't ever be on screen or even be used as like a double, but it was important to him to give the actors he was working with the performance they'd see in the final movie. And honestly, I think everyone on set thought this dude was kind of nuts, but I do think everyone who has to interact with Roger is a little stronger for having his actual voice and presence be there on set with them. And remember what I said about this being a perfect screenplay? Here's where we first see Roger's reaction to drinking alcohol. The following scene with Hoskins returning to his office, where we see him looking over the other pictures he's developed from the camera he borrowed from Dolores, and we see the two of them and Eddie's brother Teddy on Catalina Island having a great time. It's just a really special moment that characterizes and humanizes Eddie. And then we get one of the best one-ers in Zemeckis' entire career, as the camera tracks through Eddie's office and we see Teddy's side of the desk is untouched and covered in dust. And we see all these newspaper clippings that tell us that Eddie and Teddy were once big supporters of Toons and Toontown, but all of that went away when Teddy died. And this is where the main mystery of the movie kicks in. Marvin Acme has been murdered, and Roger Rabbit is the main and really only suspect. And from here we get the most traumatizing scene in the movie, and maybe the most traumatizing scene in any kids movie ever. So Christopher Lloyd's introduction as Judge Doom is perfect because of this scene. He's already menacing enough when he first enters the crime scene, but then he picks up this helpless little animated shoe and for no reason whatsoever opens up a vat of what he calls dip, which is made up of acetone, benzene, and turpentine, which are all paint thinners, and I still think that's legitimately one of the most clever things I've ever heard. But anyway, this scene is just a big bummer. It makes me feel very sad every time I watch it. Again, we see this poor shoe die on screen. We see the fear in its eyes as it's being dissolved by acid. And then just having it be a red shoe so that the running paint looks like blood is just a chef's kiss kind of traumatizing. Like, oh, you thought it was bad watching the shoe die? Now Judge Doom's hand is covered in the shoe's blood, but it's not blood, it's red paint. So this movie is still PG. And again, the scene is just straight up horrific. So we head back to Eddie's office, where by pure luck, he finds that Acme had a will in his pocket the night he died. And then we get what I think is the most visually impressive sequence of the entire movie. Roger, Eddie, and the Weasels all interacting together in Eddie's apartment. I mean, from the way Roger jumps up and down on the bed to the fact that the Weasels are all holding real guns, and I mean Roger spits out real water here. The technical aspects of shooting the scene must have been insane. Obviously, the use of motion controlled cameras helps a lot to ensure that every take has the exact same movement, but that doesn't take into account things like holding guns by fishing line at the correct height, or having to make a bed with no one on it still have the bed move in a way where it looks like someone's jumping on it. I just love this sequence, and I feel like it's the moment in the movie where the effects are really made to stand out. So Roger handcuffs himself to Eddie, and we're off to see Dolores at the bar, and her line about Eddie having a rabbit in his pocket is so stupid and funny. I really enjoy how Dolores was written overall. Her delivery is so dry, and every time she's on screen, I'm having a good time. And Roger's face when he slips out of the handcuffs and Eddie realizes what's going on reminds me of when my dog gets caught doing something he knows he shouldn't be doing. And I love that his rationale is that he had to wait to slip out of the handcuffs until it would be funny. I mean, I get it. Dolores agrees to keep an eye on Roger and stash him at the bar for a bit. Eddie goes home, and we get this weirdly sexually tense scene between Jessica and Eddie, where she reveals that it was Maroon who set Eddie up to take the patty cake photos. He was trying to blackmail Acme just like he was blackmailing Jessica to pose for the photos. And then Dolores shows up and quite literally catches Eddie with his pants down. So Doom and the Weasels show up to the bar looking for Roger, and they find him pretty much immediately. But Eddie insists Roger take a shot before being arrested, causing Roger to go bonkers. See, I told you you'd come back into play. Then this car chase with Roger and Eddie riding in Benny the cab is just another excellent example of the animated world and the physical world clashing together and somehow looking perfect. Like, I genuinely buy this world where humans and cartoons interact. And I'm not embarrassed to say that as like a 4-year-old, I was genuinely confused by this movie because I thought cartoons were fake, yet here they were clearly real and interacting with real people. And again, the entire chase sequence is just incredible. I'm not gonna lie, I think the next scene with Eddie and Roger hiding out in the theater is incredibly sweet and one of Hoskins' best moments in the entire movie. We watch as he tells Roger about how his brother was killed, and Roger begins to cry, and then Eddie apologizes for yanking him by the ears so many times. I've just always thought it was a great little moment of bonding between these two. Eddie still doesn't like Toons, but he does like Roger and cares about him. And this is where the full mystery of the movie finally begins to reveal itself. You see, throughout the entire movie, we've been hearing about Cloverleaf Industries, who've been buying up plots plots of land all throughout the city, and like I said earlier, they've also bought the red car. And when Eddie hears that Maroon has sold Maroon Cartoons to Cloverleaf Industries, it all begins to click. So, claiming to have Acme's will, Eddie sets up a meeting with Maroon to figure out the full extent of what is going on. But before Maroon can fully spill the beans, he's murdered by an unseen gunman, and now it's time for Eddie to face his fears and head to Toontown. And the scene of Eddie stopped outside the tunnel leading into Toontown is really special. The conversation Eddie has with his animated gun and bullets is where Eddie's finally facing up to his past, and of course it culminates with him going to take a swig of his booze before dumping it all out and shooting the bottle. And this lets us know that Eddie is back. His arc has been completed. It's just always been a scene that stood out to me for whatever reason. Also, this tunnel is the same tunnel from Back to the Future too. And Eddie's entrance into Toontown is nothing short of magical. From the silly singing background to Eddie crashing his car to Tweety Bird trying to murder him to Bugs and Mickey skydiving, the whole thing is just perfect. So Eddie finally arrives in Toontown and is saved by Jessica, and then teams up with her, and she gives Eddie the full rundown of her side of the story. And we learned that before he died, Acme confided in her that Doom was after Toontown and would do anything to get it. So Acme gave Jessica his will, where it stated that he's leaving Toontown to the Toons. And right as we finish getting all of this perfectly written exposition, Doom and the Weasels show up and pour dip on the road, causing Benny to crash. Poor Benny. I mean, he's fine, but still. So Doom now has Eddie and Jessica, and this booby trap joke is still legit funny, and we cut back to Roger running into Benny and the two going after Jessica and Eddie. And here is where Doom lays out his grand plan. He's buying up all of this land in LA and the red car to destroy all of it and build a freeway. And I just love that the plot of this movie essentially boils down to a sketchy real estate transaction, which again shows this is a good noir film. Okay, Doom is monologuing about his plans and how Eddie thinks it's the worst idea he's ever heard, and then it's time for my personal favorite sequence in the entire movie. After Benny and Roger show up and Roger is quickly kidnapped, Eddie comes up with the idea to try and kill the Weasels by making them laugh to death. And the song that Hoskins sings here is one that gets stuck in my head for days every time I watch this movie. And as a little boy, I thought this moment was the funniest moment in the entire movie, and Hoskins turning into a human cartoon for this entire sequence. And the way that Roger and Jessica have to help him out with making rhymes is really fun. And then it's time for the second most traumatic scene in the movie, where Doom gets run over by a giant steamroller, and they show it. In this PG film, we watch a man actually be flattened by a steamroller, but because he's a cartoon and there's no blood, it's totally fine. But the way he begins to scream as he's being run over has haunted me for as long as I can remember. And I like that Doom waits until this moment to reveal that he is in fact a Toon, and he is the one who killed Eddie's brother. And Doom dying in the dip is almost as horrifying as the shoe going in the dip. So Doom is out of the picture, and Eddie realizes the stain where Acme sprayed him with his ink has reappeared, and suddenly he knows exactly where Acme's missing will has been. They've had it the entire time, but with Acme being Acme, he wrote the whole thing in disappearing, reappearing ink, because jokes. So Doom is defeated, the Toons get to keep Toontown, and Eddie gets the girl and kisses the rabbit. What's not to love? Honestly, the ending of this movie is the only thing that keeps it from being a perfect noir movie. It's too happy, and the only person that dies is the bad guy. But overall, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a nearly perfect movie. Like I said, it expertly sets up and pays off all of its beats. The characters are all written strongly, the dialogue is sharp and to the point, and again, the interaction between the live action and animated world is still mind-blowing to this day. So, 37 years after release, what is the legacy of Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Honestly, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find many people that would say it's not an absolute classic. It's a classic 80s movie, it's a classic animated movie, it's a classic noir movie, and a classic Zemeckis movie all at the same time. And I think a big part of that is because this was a kid's movie that didn't talk down to its audience. Like, this is a smart movie and is somewhat sophisticated considering the co-lead is an animated talking rabbit. And I really do stand by my statement from the beginning of this video. Who Framed Roger Rabbit deserves its place in the Noir Hall of Fame right next to Double Indemnity and The Maltese Falcon. I had a great time revisiting this movie, and I'd love to revisit more noir stuff in the future if that's something you all would be interested in. And if you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. This is Brandon from Born to Rant, reminding you to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We release new videos covering all things nerd culture every Thursday at 7 a.m. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.